listen with. Perfect. Welcome to the SheSays Cape Town 16. This is our 16th event. I'm really excited about this one because it's about women helping women in a real way. When we sat down to, think about what we want to talk about, we actually put word out into our social media platforms and we asked different women, what do you want to hear about? And sometimes when you get feedback, you have to read between the lines. And that's how we figured out that we still want to help each other, but in a real way became very important. We all know that the month of August is Women's Month and it can represent many things for many women. So what better way than to actually talk about how we can connect and actually be there for each other in a way that matters and that truly has impact. As you know, our conversations that happen so often are open conversations. So if you have any questions, please use chat.
You are correct. And you for joining us in our Wellness Wednesdays and looking forward to the next session.
And please put yourself on mute. I see there's someone already who has literally demonstrated what I was about to say. If you can keep your mics on mute for the conversation, that would be amazing. We're going to have our cameras on, and usually, a lot of people say, should I have it on? Should I have it off? It's really up to you. But I think for the discussion and to have our speakers up front, join in whichever way that you want to. Leave us your questions in the chat and we'll definitely address them. I now want to welcome the most amazing women, and some of whom I've known and met before and some of whom are new to me today and I'm excited to speak to. I'm not going to do the intro bios like I normally do. I thought what better way to stand by and actually echo and be in their presence than to let them introduce themselves. So first, I'd like to say, Liana, please take the stage and introduce yourself to our audience.
Thanks, Pride. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really nice to be here. My name is Liana de Beer. I would call myself a social innovator and social entrepreneur. I am the CEO of an organization called Phoenix. It's a public benefit organization, which was started as a response to Fees Must Fall. The platform tries to bring communities together to raise funding for students that can't afford to go to university. I'm also the founder and CEO of a business called Wafunda. Wafunda is the edutech company, and we focus on democratizing the access to education. And for example, one of the things we recently launched is a youth-centric financial literacy product for people in South Africa.
Oh, that's incredible. Thank you, Liana. Baratang Mia, please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I am Baratang Mia, the CEO and founder of Girl Hype. It's a coding school for women and girls. And I also this year founded another organization called Buza. And with Buza, it's a platform that teaches software or digital languages in African, your own mother tongue. The platform is still at the developmental phase, like we're in beta testing, trying to get people to understand the language. And so my passion is around women and girls and empowering, especially girls between age 10 and 12, because that's where they lose their dreams. Research has proved that, so I focus more on making sure that girls between age 10 and 12 don't lose dreams and they dream better.
That's phenomenal. I also love the industry you've chosen to do that in. Much needed. Nicole Bannister.
Hello, Pride. Hello to my esteemed panelists, everybody tuning in, the whole SheSays community. It is an absolute pleasure to be here with you all. My name is Nicole Bannister. at They Call Me Bands on Instagram. I am an international MC, a sex-positive content creator, and I am the founder of a digital storytelling platform called My Basketball Team, where I publish short, sexy stories about dating, relationships, and intimacy submitted by folks across the globe in an effort to normalize public discourse around sex, around relationships, around dating, so that we can end these tragedies facing women across the globe, like gender-based violence, and we can have a clear, positive examples of what healthy relationships look like. So it's an absolute pleasure to be here. As you can tell by my accent, I'm originally from the United States, but I've been living and working in South Africa for the past 8 years. So again, it's an honor to be here with you all. Let's get into it.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I love that you've taken a topic that many people don't want to talk about, and you've actually framed it in such a way that people want to engage with it. That's phenomenal. And Elizabeth Mcguinner.
Hello, everybody. Dumelang. Like Fred said, my name is Elizabeth Mcguinner. I would say I'm a brand builder. If I try and summarize what I do professionally every day, I call it, the curator of local experiences, meaning, I work on brands that have a global footprint or aspire to have a global footprint, or I bring global brands to Africa. So that's what I do professionally. Currently, I work as the home care director at Unilever. But on my personal side, I'm also the founder of Equality, which is a company that really strives to make sure that we, promote the representation of Black women, particularly in the marketing industry, because that's where my expertise lie. I am a mom, I am a loudmouth, I am a sister, a friend, a lover of gin and tonic. I say in my intro, I'm an aspiring, what is it called? Evangelist, because, my faith is so central to what I do. And just in general, a lover of things and a lover of life. And I'm super excited to be on this panel. Yeah. So let's get into it, right?
I love it. Me quality, is that right?
Yes.
Me quality. I'm going to take that and work with it. I really am going to keep this method because listening to all of you talk about your experiences and what you do every day has already started inspiring me eternally, which I love. I also love that much of your work is about empowering women. So if you think about when we started, I said, this is about women helping women. So this word empowerment comes up a lot, but because it's so used often, I think it's kind of lost a little bit of meaning to some people, or it's evolved in meaning. So I wanted to start with, what does empowerment mean to you? And Nicole, I'd love to start with you. What does women empowerment mean to you today in this present day?
It's such a complicated and complex question, but I think if I try to think about it in the most simplest terms possible, for me, empowering women is making sure that women have the resources, the opportunities, and the responsibilities to tap into their full potential. And for me, particularly having a background in the sexual health space and the intimacy space, that's not just from a professional perspective and in the workplace, that to me also means in their personal lives. So do you have healthy relationships, not just with your intimate and romantic partners, but with your friends, with your mentors, with your family, because things like that all contribute to the success of women and this empowerment of women that we so hope for and so strive for. So acknowledging that all of these tremendous women and girls around the world have all of these things inside of them. They have that potential, that brilliance, that talent. How do we tap into that and then amplify it, right? And whatever that means for them, for that individual woman or that individual girl, that to me is what I think of when I'm thinking about empowering women.
The empowerment part is as a word is so powerful in itself. Elizabeth, I don't know if you want to contribute to that, because I also, in constructing this, was like, do we say helping women? Do we say empowering women?
Yeah.
What does it mean to you?
It's a big one for me, because I was saying at a black and white level, absolutely for it. But I also think that language is super important, right? In articulating and getting things done, and how you think of things. So for me, empowerment is almost a thing of somebody giving you your power. And I think for me, equality was really about understanding that every woman has power. Yeah. Just by virtue of being born, a creator, a life giver, all of these beautiful roles that we play outside of our professional sides or whatever titles we eventually acquire through our lives, you have power. The key is really knowing how to harness it, how to use it in all the different spaces that you're in. And when you see somebody else impeding on another woman's ability to use their power, then speaking up. So I think that is also something for me, is this empowerment factor, is sometimes you need to spin it around in your head. And for me, I think I also take that kind of anchor from the faith, right? Because scripturally speaking, it says, I didn't give you the spirit of fear, I gave you the spirit of, love, power, and a sound mind. So you already have it. The question is, why aren't you using it? Or how can you be helped? Or how can we help each other to use our power?
It's interesting as you're saying, how can we use it? Coming up with this topic, I wasn't sure how many people would want to hear about it and sign up. And then I realized many women are still in doubt of the idea that women do support women or should support or do help women. I read a few, I go through Twitter, Instagram, just understanding what people's sentiments are, especially in a month like this. And it does come across that there's still a lot of doubt from women about the idea that women empowering women and women helping women and women powering women is not yet happening. So Baratang, I know that you are passionate about this topic. You're passionate about empowering women. Why do you think there's still doubt? And how do we maybe start hurdling past this doubt? And what can we do practically to start showing up as women to hurdle past it?
Sure. Why do I think there's still doubt? You spent me off a little bit. I think the doubt exists because the opportunities that are on the table, let's say opportunities that will take someone, any individual forward and change, make them a better person right from when they are born. They were laid down by a very patriarchal society. And education system, who access education, how they access it, and where do they go? It's a very unequal and inequitable distribution of opportunities and resources. And resources meaning it starts from home, how we rear boys and girls differently, and what are the expectations, what are we defined to be as a woman. Now it's very difficult for any man sitting in a boardroom to see that there's something wrong with 15 white males sitting in a boardroom discussing a scientific project, because they worked very hard to get there. Their parents paid a lot of money. They don't, because it's not about them, they can't see it outside themselves. They don't realize that for them to achieve and for them to be where they are, it's because of the opportunities that they were allowed by the society, because of where they grew up, how they grew up, where they were born. Now, also the other thing is nobody wants to take the responsibility of privilege. When you are very privileged, you don't want to take the responsibility. You want of how you got the privilege. Because it can be a male privilege. Just by being male, you are privileged already. Or it can be a color privilege. Just by being born white, you're privileged already. It can be where you are born. Somebody's born in Cape Town, somebody's born at Oxford. There's a huge difference already. But me taking the privilege, it makes it difficult for me to see it as an advantage over someone else, because I'm thinking we are all equal. We are all human beings. Why do you have to burden your problems on me? So it becomes a challenge to want to change mindsets and say, we just want equality and we just want opportunities to be shared equally. We're not saying we're taking away from you, be privileged as you want to be, have all the opportunities you want. We don't want them, but we're just saying, let us get rid of poverty. Let us get rid of unemployment. Let us get rid of women not being in leadership. That's what we want to get rid of. We don't want to touch your privilege. No, continue with it. Open spaces, give women a voice to speak, give them respect. And those are things that people who are privileged, it takes time to hear.
Pride. Sorry, can I just jump in here as well? Because I think your question, and to Bharat, this question around why is it that there is this ongoing idea that women don't support each other or women don't empower. I think there is a truth in that, right? And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves in terms of the actual practical steps. But I think one of the first things that we can all do in empowering or helping other women repower, I think Kule said in the chat, repower, right? Is freeing each other from the weight of our own expectations and judgments. Yeah, I think is it Brene Brown who talks about the 12 categories of shame and how for women, a lot of the shame comes from body image issues or, your parenting and motherhood or, parenthood styles. And I think some of the reason why we don't see each other as supportive structures is because we're very judgmental structures. Yeah. And a lot of it comes from our own insecurities, in these spaces, right? And so it's really great to look out and say, whoo, at least I'm not like this one, or at least I'm better than that one, right? Yeah. I mean, I might be bad, but I'm not as bad as this one. And so we do this to each other to say, you can't do this, or don't wear that, or, you're too loud, you're too soft, you're not determined enough, you're too determined, you're outspoken, you're too shy. But this is the weight that we then put on each other that doesn't feel like we're empowering each other, because we keep expecting very binary, expressions of womanhood. And I think that's one of the first things that we should look into as women and really ask ourselves is, are we developing our own awareness and compassion, so that we can free other women from this expectation to be something. There's no such thing as a perfect woman. And so if we free each other from that, it'll make it easier.
Oh, I'm drawing from what Baratang said, which is the construct with where we exist almost created a scarcity mindset as well. And then I'm drawing from what Elizabeth is saying, which is that within that scarcity mindset, we then start judging each other and constructing this perfection of a woman, which actually doesn't exist. And it all begins with the limitation that's been placed. So what I love about the SheSays community is that there's a group of women who want to come together and say, we're going to break limitations, and we're actually going to go out there and do something a little bit different. I know each one of you has chosen your work and the things that you do every single day as a way to break some of these things. So I want to ask, what are some of the steps you took? For example, I'm going to start with Liana to bring you into the conversation here. What are some of the steps that you took in deciding, how am I going to empower women? And actually, when I do that, I know I'm going to be faced with resistance. So what keeps you going in that journey?
But I think for me to answer that question, I need to go back to the previous question and just talk about kind of equality versus equity versus justice, and how we cannot even start to talk about equality if we're not talking about justice. And we cannot get justice if we're not healing as people, healing as self, and then healing in group format. And that kind of comes out in the mindset of scarcity, in the way that we have internalized biases, internalized sexism, internalized racism, how we filter ourselves out of opportunities sometimes. And then, of course, talking about being a white person and what work I need to do when I am on the journey of empowerment. And if going back to Elizabeth's point, if I look at myself and I expect consistent excellence, that's a very big ask, and I'm going to fail. And if I cannot allow myself to not have to be consistently excellent, I won't give other people the space to also not be consistently excellent. So I have to kind of start there and go like, okay, how do I operate with grace for myself so that I can give grace to other people? How do I operate with kindness towards myself to give kindness to other people? And then how I make my decisions and how I've made my decisions to this point is really, what are my privileges? How can I use my privileges to correct, to contribute, to provide platform, and also how can I heal in myself, do the internal work, and heal in community. I really make decisions based on serving community. Since I was little, this is how I've made my decisions in life. And it takes on different forms, right? We're not binary creatures, so there's different things that I'm passionate about. And one of those things are absolutely the empowerment of women. And that means individual women, self-expression, giving people space to be themselves. And that might not look the way I think empowerment looks for women, or the way I want to be empowered, and understanding and then taking that into the work I do, into the platform, and being in the edutech space and really trying to connect communities and to create opportunities for others to uplift themselves or to find their own opportunities. And that is kind of the driving force. And it goes through to everything you do, the way you treat people around you, in your personal life as well as in your workspace, but then also when you develop products, how human-centric are they? Are we understanding the complexities of the socioeconomic and political conditions that we are operating in? Can we do things that is about justice as much as it is about equity and equality?
I think the standstill for me, the beginning of the standstill for me is when you said beginning with self, because how are you actually going to show grace, or and how are you actually going to actually show up for someone else when you haven't shown up for self? Thank you for that. And at the end there, you captured something that I actually want to carry on with, because I actually want to bring us into a space of solutioning, especially for the workplace, especially if we're going to show up for each other, if we're going to say women supporting each other in the workplace, what does that practically look like? And you've given us one example there already. Nicole, I want to ask you, what does women showing up for each other and uplifting each other in your workplace look like, in your workspace, in your industry? What does that look like? What are the practical examples women can start thinking about to apply every single day as they walk out of the door?
That's actually a super interesting question for me, because once we start getting into my line of work and we start to talk about anything around relationships, anything around dating, anything around intimacy, the conversation can get really tricky really quickly, because the reality of talking about intimate conversations is that it's still very much stigmatized amongst women, amongst men, amongst anyone who wants to have these dialogues and these conversations, right? Like if we look at a group of women such as ourselves, and we're all brilliant, we're all talented, we all have these companies and these businesses, and then all of a sudden I say the word sex and then somebody cringes, that to me is a problem. Like it shouldn't be an issue that this thing that's this integral component of our livelihoods, something that can give us the energy to go off and have the most successful day at work, something that can help us end the day in a way, whether it's us on ourselves or with our partners, if that's something that causes this sort of stigma or this taboo, or there's some sort of nervousness around it, then we have to figure out ways to address that and to acknowledge that in conversations. So when I think about these solutions, right, and I think about women, not only in the workplace, but again, in sort of your day-to-day interactions, like if I have friends, if I have peers, if I have women close to me and I don't like their partner, I'm going to tell you that I don't like your partner. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that this partner that you have, who you're being intimate with, who you have this romantic relationship with, that is the best thing ever, when actually I think you deserve to be treated better. You as my friend, you as my girlfriend, as my peer, as my colleague. I see what's happening in your personal life. And as someone committed to healthy relationships and amplifying, sex positive dialogue, I can't sit back as your peer and just let you go off and do this thing with this person who's actually not right for you. And it's those types of conversations that I think are not happening as frequently as they should. And especially for me, being sort of in the entertainment space, working with a lot of actors, lots of rappers, DJs, being in kind of like the club scene, which for me is an interesting space to be in. When I host, when I MC events, I see predatory behavior happening on the streets in these nighttime communities. And it is my role as your female ally to get you out of a situation that I know you don't want to be in. I mean, in a very practical example is like, I have been in club environments and club situations before where I'm there promoting something, sponsoring something, whatever. And I see a girl with a guy, and this girl clearly doesn't want to be with him. Maybe she's had a lot of alcohol. She you can tell, we're women, we have our spidey senses as women. You can tell that something's not right here, okay? And this will be a random woman who I don't know at all. I will go up to her, hand on her shoulder, hey girlfriend, let's go to the bathroom quickly. And I will physically move her out of this situation. And once we get into the bathroom, I'm like, hey, let's talk about, are you okay here? Are you happy being with this person? Do you want me to get you into a different situation? Are you okay? I just wanted to check. If you're cool, then you're cool. Like, I just wanted to make sure you were safe. And it's like, it's showing up in those real ways, especially for me in the sexual health space, like basically being there, being that ally, being that support system, whether that shows up in sort of, spaces like, out at night, whatever, like that, which is more of my kind of space, but also in the workplace, we have to, sort of do the real things that we as women need from one another to make sure that we're empowering and uplifting those women in those spaces, because it's just critical. We can't let that kind of stuff slide.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, one of the reasons why we wanted a diverse group of women working in diverse environments is because, we have a tendency of separating the workplace and then my after work life. And as women, we don't have that luxury. We actually, the women you're describing are the same ones who were at the office earlier, and whilst we sometimes want to sit and talk about how can we empower each other at the office is all day, for women, because all the spaces we're walking into need that level of safety. So I actually appreciate that feedback. Baratang, if I think of your environment where you're tackling an industry that till today, is still very much male dominated presently, so, and very obviously so. In fact, we in our advertising industry ran a survey in last year on gender equality, and one of the findings we had is that in the dev space, in the development space, tech space, there were no women in the advertising industry, tech environment. And by no women, I mean 0 leaders. That's the result we got from the survey. So I genuinely want to hear from you. How do then women in that space, how do you recommend some of the practical ways women can show up for each other? Not just from a support perspective on interpersonal skills, but definitely on how we support each other to upskill each other for the work.
I'm going to use the basic ones and say mentorship, sponsorship is the best way for women to show up for each other. And say, you know, because of the way the tech industry is structured, learning software dev and being one of the best is a skill. And it takes a lot of practice and failing and practicing and failing. And it's not something that most girls or women were encouraged to do when they were young. So it's only now that we are busy doing that. And I think one of the big failure of the industry is that the industry is growing super fast. Opportunities come fast, jobs change faster, and people are not sharing. Like one of the biggest growing jobs in the next coming 5 years is in quantum physics. Now, how many women are studying quantum physics? I know one in South Africa, and she want to go to space. Yeah, obviously she didn't, but she's still the only woman I know who studied quantum physics. Now she's doing a lot to get more women into her space, but it's very difficult because the challenge comes from high school where girls did not study mathematics. The government expect girls to get 30% out of mathematics, and they are the poorest performing ones. So it's a circle and a loop of non-performing that we expect the industry to close. And because I've been in the industry for too long and I've been saying we don't encourage women to be in the space, it was cultural. Now the culture has shifted a little bit. The coding of men in a dark room and being geeky is gone. We now can code anywhere, we can do anything, anyone. There's no gender barriers now for one to become, which is gender barriers. This job would require you to work for 24 hours for it. It takes women telling other women, the few that are there, that it's doable. And it takes corporates changing their culture to accommodate women, because women drop at that age, 22 to 25. That's when they start getting married, finishing off universities, bearing children and raising children. And that's where the drop happens. Now, when they come back to the industry, they don't have a welcome party. And we need to create that welcome party. We need to create a culture that will allow a woman to leave a job and continue working so that they don't lose the skill, because coding is a skill that develops every day. I mean, for me, I always tell my students, I code every day, at least 1 hour. I read tech newspapers every day. 5 o'clock, I'm awake reading what's happening on TechCrunch, what's happening on IT Web, what's happening. So I keep myself up to date. I'm not just speaking. And when I started coding, I used to code for 24 hours, 8 hours. And that's what we need to tell other women, that programmatic is not just going to happen from thin air. Obviously, nowadays, there's no code apps. That's very easy. It's making life easy for women. And I think the scale is going to change once women know what are the opportunities. How do you access them? And those who are there, women I'm going to close now and say, women have been put in a vulnerable state. So whether you are a leader and you are the best leader, you are bossy, you are what, you are not a good woman, you are what, by your peers. Whether you are at the bottom, you are this, you don't achieve. So we are seen as vulnerable all the time, because that's how we want to be defined. So as women who've broken the barriers, we need to stop it. When they say there's 5 of you guys, we say, yes, there's 5 of us, but there's 10 people working in the industry, and some of them are in HR, some of them are there. You can make sure that you change that. I like what Nicole said. In the sex, in what she said, that when you're sitting with women and you start talking about sex, we all blip our eyes because it's very personal and it's very intimate. That's exactly what it trickles It starts there and it trickles into everything, because we think our family life, the abuse that you are experiencing at home, the abuse that you are experiencing when you're sitting in the boardroom, it's separate. It's not. Women are made to feel vulnerable all the time, because if they showcase, when I have to explain this, even the most powerful woman in the boardroom, when she walks out, she has thousands other people saying, oh, she's boss, she's this, and we need to stop it. And as women, once we support, mentor each other, and empower each other to understand that, you know what, just be you and do you, they will follow. They will follow. Then we are going to be fine.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about breaking down the public and the private and just realizing that the two are so related. Elizabeth, you have the work structure that's most familiar to people on this Zoom, which is the corporate work environment or agency work environment, where you have a manager, you have a boss, and you almost feel tied up. If you're going to be doing something different and radical, it's going to be very difficult. So how do you advocate for women in your space? You know, how do you advocate for female suppliers? How do you advocate for getting a female-led agency? What are some of the steps that you take practically to say, you know, I'm walking into the office, this is the agenda. Not only am I going to support the women in the room, how do I bring more women on board? Describe that a little bit, day in the life of.
See, I think I am really privileged to work for a company that in itself has aligned itself to that, you know, to say we are in full support of having, you know, gender equality at all levels of the company, and set that as a tool that is measured, right? So Unilever, I think, put it out there that by 2025, it wants to achieve kind of gender equality at a total company. It's great that we've achieved it ahead of that, right? So we measure that, when we are in rooms and talking kind of succession planning, we are looking at the number of women that we have, the number of white women, Black women, colored women at every single level, What is that kind of funnel? What are we doing to close skills gaps, in order to allow a woman to progress to the next level? Who do we see as high potential women who are showing, you know, that kind of cue or that they can lead, and how do we accelerate them into the next level? So these are conversations that happen constantly. I think for me, I'm lucky to also work on Sunlight as a brand. It's one of our biggest brands, I think, as Unilever on the continent. And lucky in that one part of my work is to really grow this brand into a master brand across Africa, right? And I think to do that, you have to have a lot more people have preference for it, you know, and go out there and choose it versus any other brand at any given buying moment. And so when working on the brand and trying to see, okay, so how do I then market it, right? I actually had to do a little bit of introspection to say what works on the brand and what doesn't work. And a lot of what was played back in terms of what doesn't work is the fact that the brand is not representing the woman now, right? It's not representing the progressive stance that women have right now. In fact, I'd say the home care category is probably one of the biggest victims, right, in keeping women in these kind of boxes and very clear gender roles, you know? So part of my work, actually, in more the practical sense, is the unstereotyping of women and what women can and can't do. And I'm pointing to Sunlight as one of the brands that's on the journey to do that, but they're brands within the organization that do that very easily. Like if I point to Dove, through the Real Beauty campaign that they were running for over 10 years, and now into this kind of show us and showing different aspects of women and different women. These are the things that keep motivating me to say, go ahead and continue to do that. Prad, you touched on the supplier element. That's an important one for me as well, because I think as a brand owner, I have the ability to flex my money, right? And I think sometimes as brand custodians or marketers or whoever, if you have a budget, that money is some power to make some change. So when we speak to our agency partners, one of the things that I ask for in the pitches for directors who will treat for an ad we're going to shoot is to say, I want to see more diverse producers. I want to see more females represented. In terms of the people who I work with as vendors, you know, what does that list look like? Is it diverse? So women, I think it was, who was it? Thomas Sankara said, they hold up the other half of the sky So it's not sustainable not to have women represented in all spheres of society. So I think I'm lucky that I work for a company that supports it. So when you do speak up for it, it's not seen as something that's shock factor or, oh, she's being brave or being an actor. This is just what we do. Yeah. And I think from a leadership all the way from the top, right? Like you need leaders who say that and put it out there and say, this is what our company is about, because everybody else then follows suit, right? And we're lucky to have that in Alan Joe. There was one point, sorry, Pride, that I wanted to go back to that both Baratang and Nicole, I think, touched on, which is practically for me also is normalizing certain conversations. So one of the things I can practically do in my work, because I work in the marketing and advertising space, and, you know, with a company like Unilever that 3 billion times a day it touches, you know, consumers, and, you know, you have over 400 brands. That's immense power that you have to change society's conversations and society's perceptions of what women can and can't do. So what I really, really love is when brands are brave enough to shatter the narrative. I'll go back to a brand I think that just recently won, I think it was Cannes, a Grand Prix at Cannes, which was Bodyform. It really changed my view of, you know, the power that advertising and marketing has, because for the first time in a very long time, a pad brand was venturing into the full kind of conversation spectrum of the female reproductive process, the sexual process, you know, the health challenges, etc. And in a very real, authentic and brave way. That is the power that I think at a practical level I have within my marketing industry. But as a leader in the organization, I also have the responsibility to say, when it's not happening, what is the plan? How are we going to make a plan to make it happen?
I love that you're challenging all aspects of it, from the work you do, but also from the influence you have in the organization. If anyone hasn't told you that, it's still a courage point for many women that they haven't necessarily been able to cross yet. And it's not easy to just jump in and say, I'm using this budget for X, because you have to account for it. You have to account for the results. Liana, in your space, what are the practical steps do you see that are still, you know, possible for women to take on every single day as they walk into environments similar to yours?
I'll throw out a bunch and hopefully some of them lands, but I would say there's a couple of things that I try to do. And normalizing some things, absolutely. Normalizing tears, for example, in conversations, we are tired sometimes and the pressure's too much. So when someone cries, to not shut them down, to let them cry it out in a professional space, like normalizing that, normalizing talking about periods in the workspace and when you're on your period. Things like having a disagreement with another woman in front of other people without dismissing each other or disrespecting each other is really important. We have to be able to have constructive disagreements in front of men and other people so that we can all normalize the fact that it's okay to disagree, and we can do that in a beautiful, respectful way. Things like complimenting someone in front of other people. So saying, hey, I just want to give a shout out to this person for doing this super cool thing. I know you worked really, really hard, is a very simple way for us to contribute. Things like understanding that mothers have sometimes more challenges in just managing their schedule and having space for that, right? Whether that's you, the manager, or the leader, or maybe a co-worker, that if the mother can't show up at 3 o'clock because they're picking up the child at 3 o'clock, that's not the end of the world. Let them finish their job at 8 o'clock if that's what suits them, you know, something like that. Things
Diana,
like,
sorry, can I just jump in on that one as well? Corporates having policies that recognize that. So it's easier when the policies reflect the fact that we understand that women actually do other work but the paid work, right? So unpaid work is still work. And we know globally that, you know, 3 times, women do 3 times more of that unpaid work. So what are your leave policies? Do you have flexible work schedules? You know, your maternity leave, how much of it is paid and unpaid? Yeah, paternity leave, you know, so that it's not only mom who stays at home. Can dads also go and help out at home when a young one is born? Those things I think also are practical steps. And even like GBV in South Africa is a little one. It's not a little one, sorry. It's one that is peculiar to South Africa. do we have policies that acknowledge that women might need to take time out to go deal with, domestic violence matters? And are we compassionate in that sense?
I
Sorry, Leanne. I wanted to jump in because then
I think
might have ran away.
Great, and policies are critical, but I often get asked the question, but I don't have power to change the policy. So what do I change, right? Like, how do I fit in? How am I thinking in a space? How do I empower? And yes, the policy conversation we need to have with other leaders or other managers. When you have the power to make change, make those changes. But what do you do when you're in a space when you don't have the power to make those changes, right? Like, how can we signal boost each other? How can we support each other? How can we motivate? How can we pass the mic? So one of the things that, for example, is a really good way to empower a junior person is to include them in strategic meetings. They don't have to be in that meeting, but it's a way to expose them and give them access to the way people think and talk in very senior meetings. You can ask them to maybe not say something, but to sit in to get some exposure. Another thing, one of my colleagues, I get to work with incredible women. We're mostly women in my space because I get to hire them, right? But I have this colleague, Nihasha, and she does this thing without even telling people. She has this natural ability to connect her team members to people in a network for learning opportunities. So she would say, you're really struggling, or I think you could really benefit from speaking to someone that understands a certain marketing channel or certain software. This friend of mine is super awesome, super senior. He probably worked under her in a previous company. I'm going to connect you to, he's willing to sit with you for 2 hours, just meet and chat to him. She creates this touch points for her team with other people, not in the business, outside of the network. And that's like such a beautiful way to try and create opportunity, open conversations, and empower them. And she does that without ever she doesn't tell people she's doing it. She's just doing it because she thinks it's the right thing to do. So those are some of the practical things that I would recommend people can do in their everyday lives to try and give space. And then as white women, understanding that I'm tired all the time. I'm exhausted all the time. And then I think, if I'm this tired as a woman, a white woman, how tired are my peers of color, because they're dealing with things that I don't sometimes even understand, and having that conversation with yourself and saying, okay, cool. Am I creating space so I can understand the challenges that people that are different from me are facing so that I can support them in that manner? And I'll stop there.
That's powerful. I wanted to add one more to your list, and that's normalizing care for women with no kids. Because I think in the workplace, it gets overlooked and they get almost lumped with some of the unsaid work because they apparently have more capacity. But, everybody's dealing with many, many things that are different. And I love your expression about almost just being conscious towards somebody else's everyday life. And I think that application would be amazing as well. Hey?
There's a role here. So I think we should also just throw it all out.
Add.
Paying women equally for equal work, for me, is a passion point, right? And I can talk about it in the corporate sense, but also as a person who can use their disposable income, to give to another woman vendor or a business owner, right? Sometimes there's this, but if I go into Zara and I buy a pair of jeans for, 800 Rand, it's not a thing. But if I'm going to a small business and somebody says the dress is 800, there's almost this kind of, why should I be? But that's her value proposition, right? So if I don't think that's a value proposition for me, then I need to step away, but stop trying to make women undervalue what they think is at a certain level. Yeah. So if I walk into a shop and it says it's 600, don't always try and negotiate it out. My mom is a big negotiator, right? Like, she never pays full price for anything, but just be conscious sometimes that, this is how somebody is going to sustain a family, and with women, I think there was this research that like 90% of the, money they make goes back into, their families and, extended families. So also be conscious that in spending with women, you're making societal changes, right? So for me, this kind of paying women what they deserve in the professional sense, as well as in my personal capacity in terms of how I support women entrepreneurs, is there. I think in South Africa, they were saying the average pay gap is like 23% to 30%. And I'm like, so like for a quarter of the year we're just working for free.
Pretty much.
And I want to jump in there on that point, Elizabeth, because Liana is talking about all these fantastic practical steps in the workplace, and Elizabeth and Baratang, you both touched on that as well. But practical things in our day-to-day lives that we can do to support and empower women. If we're gonna go out, we're gonna be spending our money anyway. We might as well be channeling it and funneling it into women-owned businesses and women-owned, people of color businesses, right? Like literally here today on this panel, my earrings are from Pichulik, which is an amazing women-owned jewelry brand here in Cape Town. My top and my headpiece are from my most favorite West African female designer, Mama D, who has a shop on Long Street. The bags on the wall behind me, Sashwati Marie, Black-owned, women-owned, one of each Black-owned, women-owned bag. Like this is, my day-to-day spending. If I'm gonna spend money anyway, why don't I invest in women businesses, these small businesses that Elizabeth touched on, especially for businesses of women in color. And I try to do a lot of work where I'm like promoting Black-owned business or women-owned businesses, because again, like we're going to birthday parties, we're going to events. Why not buy the cake from the woman of color who has a cute little bake shop in Woodstock, right? Why not buy the present from a small women-owned business like Kafui Naturals, where she's got these amazing hair and skincare products for men, for women, for however you identify, right? Why not buy, it's Hot Girl Summer is coming up, in a couple months. I'm trying to get my beach body ready. Why not buy the swimsuit from Mapula Swimwear, this amazing Black-owned.
In fact, is your trainer a woman? Is your doctor a woman? Who's managing your money?
Exactly.
Financial advisor. Have you tried to find one? I love that.
Yeah.
Right. Can I say?
Yes,
I love the discussion, but I always say there's 50% of South African women do not know the challenges that they are facing. They think it's normal. Because they grew up in that circumstances and that's what they know, and they don't know beyond that. So if you grew up in a family where mom goes to work, she's a domestic worker, and teenage pregnancy is very high in South Africa, and that's a reality of South Africa, and we can never in our life, I am so sorry about that, we can never in our entire history say we are not aware that 70% of South African women have no voice. When I say have no voice, I mean it. They go to work, and when they are put in these vulnerable positions, they accept it because that's what they know. Women have businesses, and when you negotiate, I bought these earrings in Rwanda, and when I got there, I was told you must negotiate because they make their prices higher. And I'm standing there thinking, I've been at some of these women's homes, and I know they're really suffering. So even though they made the prices very higher, they don't know the value chain and how things work. So for me, I always say, how do we help women helping women as the topic? All of us here are very privileged anyhow, somewhere by default. Whether black or white, for us to be sitting here on internet, having access to internet and being able to talk like this, that means there's some form of privilege that we received, depending on how we define it. And I would just say, I think we also sometimes need to look back, because girls don't wake up one day and being girls for the rest of their lives. They wake up and become girls with periods. They wake up and become girls who have to go to university. They wake up and have to be a woman who's married to someone, and they wake up and have to be someone working for someone. And that journey can be, I don't have pets. So it can be you working out of Pick and Pay and buying a pet and giving them to an NGO. It can be you coming to Girl Hype. We teach young girls in schools who have no privilege at all. You saying, you know what, I'm going to mentor a girl today. It can be that woman who we don't have mentors for end up being pregnant, and she knows nothing about intimacy, about abuse, about relationships. And it can be you saving them, because in their communities, all of us, I graduated and I walked out of my community. I go there to visit or do empowerment work. What is that? Because I don't engage with that girl every day. She doesn't know how to engage with the life. And for me, it's how do we make sure that when we are talking all these fancy ones, the privileged people, how do we help them in the corporate world? How do we make sure that we look backwards and we say South Africa is one of the most injustice society we can ever find. It's one of the most unequitable society we can ever find. And how do we make sure that we look back and we say, that woman who never had a privilege to go to university, and she's been a domestic worker all her life, what does it say about her daughters? If I don't go to that community and engage with the girls and mentor them. So for me, that's giving back to those who have no voice at all, and they are so vulnerable and they will never have an opportunity. And the window is closing so much because corruption is so high, the government is spending money on rubbish instead of spending money on the people that needs the resources.
But Baratan, can I say then as well, people like you, people like me grew up in those areas, yeah? Still have family back in those areas, yeah? Still go there for whether it's like a family event or a wedding or whatever. So there is that, I think for me, it's that level of empathy and humility to know that you might be the first, you might be the only, but that is not an okay narrative. So I think it's in understanding that then you have this responsibility to make sure you're not the last and you don't continue to be the only in these spaces that can drive that level of passion to go back and, say, okay, let's talk. I was here today. This is what I did. And sharing very, very candidly about our experiences. I think that's the other thing, because, you're seeing Liz on the, SheSays call, but I go through real struggles, yeah, as a woman and a mother who's trying to balance out all my multiple roles, right? There are days where I get out of bed and I really just don't feel like it. I don't feel like talking in English, like my English quota depletes, right? I don't feel like putting on the hat. Those who know will know what I'm talking about. But it's being vulnerable to say, yes, I got here, or I'm here, but here's some of the challenges that I've had to experience. Here's my learnings. Here's some perspective, because that encourages other women to say, not only is it possible, it's not an exception. I can also become someone like that. And if I need help and I'm struggling with a certain thing, here are people that have gone through it themselves. And here's who I can talk to about that. I think mentorship, like you were talking about, and sponsorship, right, are super, super powerful things that we can practically do for each other. And you don't have to be a director to then be a mentor to someone.
I really want us, just one pride. I want us, the people who are privileged and the people who have gone through the journey, to go back and say, I can do that for you. I know how difficult it is to not have pets, or to not even have a mom that I can talk about when I'm experiencing period pains, or I now want to have sex. I don't know who I should ask. What is this thing that this boy wants from me? So we need to be able to go back and give back to those, because the core of it is their voices have been so suppressed. They think it's normal. They think it's fine to go through that. That is why GBV in South Africa can be written about, and we can go back and talk about it, but we are not being proactive. We are being reactive. Being proactive is going back to those young people and saying, you know what? Don't think what you are going through is wrong. Let's not wait for them to come to us. We cannot ever look for people to come and ask.
You've actually given me the right words to summarize what I've heard today, which is, in order for us to actually help women, we are being reactive, but we also have to be proactive. Some of being reactive is taking the things that we know to be normal and starting to change those in a practical way, day-to-day things, and actually empowering ourselves with tools to do that. Part of being proactive is going back and giving back to the communities that we come from. And I have to say every single one of us, just by virtue of being South African, has a community we need to go back to, no matter what race you are, no matter how old you are. As a woman right now, I know for a fact that we all have something at home that we could go back and adjust, fix, and do better in. Use mentorship as an example of your energy, supporting women in practical ways, pay women what they do. And part of helping women sounds like it's also adjust the invoice for the woman who didn't know she should be charging more. I kind of picked that up in between. But the one summary that I picked up from all of you is that it starts with self. Unless you're doing those things for yourself, you're giving yourself grace, you are allowing yourself to cry when you need to, be vulnerable when you need to, you won't be able to sort of identify that for somebody else. I hope I've captured some of your sentiments. And I wanted to check in this last 2 minutes if there's any closing remarks from any of you. And while I scroll through the chat to see if I've missed any questions, but I think we tried to answer as many of them as we went along. But I'd like to hear from each one of you, just your closing thought on what people can just take away as a positive last thought on this topic. Nicole, I'll start with you.
Absolutely. I just want to end by saying that what we're doing here in this moment, sharing our stories, storytelling is a critical component of how we continue to move the needle on women's rights and women's empowerment and what we do. Each of us has a unique and dynamic story to share. And when we share it, we give and hold space for others to do the same and to be their best, most authentic, most successful versions. So not just to those of us who are on the panel and who are, asked to be here and speak and share our stories today, but for every single one of you watching this in the chat, tuning in today, share your story, highlight your examples and what's happened to you. And as you move forward, just know that your story is important, it's valued, it's tremendous, and you are inspiring so many people, whether they tell you or not. So keep sharing your story.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I think for me, what I'd say is you are a god. The sooner you get to that realization, the quicker the world can start benefiting from the work that you need to be doing on this earth. So don't entertain too much the voices that say otherwise. Don't, and be fine with not being everybody's cup of tea. But the people that need to benefit from your work, your life, your testimony, your action, those are the people that you need to then individually focus in on, right? And use our power to repower, as somebody said here, the our women that are in our communities. Yeah.
Amazing. Liana.
I just say, don't underestimate the power of showing up for yourself and showing up for others. And every little bit helps. And just look around at the incredible women that basically carries and takes this country forward every day. And to not lose hope. We can do great things if we do it together.
I love that. Baratang.
For me, it's when women stand together and stand up for each other, will achieve a lot and stop being the strong one in the room or being the most powerful one. I think it's gonna get us very far. And that strong woman, she really needs you. Be there for her when she needs you, because she also goes through the same as every other woman. And girls don't stay girls for the rest of their life. They grow up to be women and they need to be empowered.
Amazing. And a final word from me and the SheSays team: don't underestimate the power of small daily steps to get this change to happen. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your word. And thank you for everyone who's come on, as usual, supporting, wow, the conversation. It's been really, really good. Thank you so much. I think that's us.